Hi again. Welcome to another Sun Dragon Tips and Tricks Ranunculus Assistance video. This one I think is number 7. Now we're into the yoke. And again, this is not meant to be a full-fledged, like all of the ranunculus pattern from beginning to end. It's just a few helpful tips along the way to assist you with specific parts of the pattern. Please get the pattern on Ravelry. And then this can help you out as you work your way through it. This April 2022, we started in April the Ranunculus Knit Along at Sun Dragon Art and Fiber, but you can make it anytime you want. So I am making a worsted weight ranunculus out of Juniper Moon Cumulus Rainbow. It's already starting to change color. Ooh. And the yoke, yoke is the fancy word for the part up here, the part up by your shoulders. So think about when you yoke oxen, you put it over their shoulders. You put the harness over their shoulders. So that's the fancy word in sweater making for the part between the collar and the sleeve separation in many instances. This pattern has a little bit more before sleeve separation after the yoke, but the yoke has all of the fun, fancy stitches in it. These aren't super hard if you take your time, but I'm going to try to film a couple of videos to help you with things that will keep you on track as you're working through the yoke. My lace weight one, I have already finished most of, trying to make sure it's the right side out here. I've already finished most of the fancy yoke work. And since it's lace weight, it's hard to see some of this, but there's some stitches that pull in fun directions up here, and then there's an easier part, and then a part that I like to say looks a little bit like flowers made with yarn overs down here, and then that pulling part again. The parts that I would like to show to you is it starts with round 2 of the yoke, where you're inserting your needle between stitches. I'm not going to do every single one. There's different variations on this that she does, but I'm going to show you the basics of how to do the inserting row and then the row after that, which is combining those fancy inserts with regular stitches. It makes a really cool pattern that's not too crazy to do if you know what you're doing. So let's get to it. So here I've just completed round 1 of the yoke. I followed her instructions to knit and complete any remaining German short rows from the last section, to remove the marker from the front. So I only have one marker left, and that is my end of round marker. Sometimes called beginning of round marker, but she calls it end of round. So I'm ready to start round 2. And again, I don't want to reveal too much detail of these. There's different variations on this, but this one starts with a single knit, knit 1, and then it says insert RHN, which is the right hand needle, from front, so starting with the side that's facing you, between the second and third stitches on the left hand needle, LHN, and draw through a loop to create a new stitch. I like to do patterns 1 comma at a time. There's more in this little parentheses, but she says, again, take your right hand needle, RHN, insert it from front between the second and third stitches on the left hand needle. So 1, 2, 3. Between these 2 stitches, 2 and 3, you're going to insert it between them, but go under the left hand needle. So it's this spot right here. If I flip it over, you can see I have gone between these stitches, not catching fronts of anything, going absolutely between these 2 stitches. It's harder to show you on the front, but I'm not catching any of those stitches on the front. I am just going between these 2 stitches. And to draw through a loop, wrap your yarn around, or if you're continental, pick the yarn. So it's just like a knit stitch, and just pull that back under and through. And I wouldn't tighten it up a whole lot. I would let it sit there. You've drawn it through. And then it says to knit 2. So you're going to knit those 2 stitches that you just skipped over to do this. And it says to repeat everything in the parentheses the whole way around. So that means you go back to that knit 1, go ahead and knit a single stitch, take your right hand needle and put it between the second and third stitches on your left hand needle, stick it under and straight through, wrap your yarn around. Let me tilt this so you can see what's happening on the back. And I'm going to duck that under to the front. And then I'm going to go ahead and knit 2 stitches, which takes me right up to the gap I just created. Then repeat, knit 1, take your right hand needle and put it between the second and third stitch on your left hand needle, pull up a loop, and then knit 2. Those 2 you knit should be the ones you just pulled the stitch across. It's very important. The first time I did my lace work, I skipped this knit 1. I made assumptions about the pattern. Knit 1, right hand needle between the second and third stitch on your left hand needle. And again, you're going under the left hand needle between those stitches, but not catching anything else. Pull up a loop, knit 2. You're going to do that all the way around. I'll show you a couple more without talking once I finish this one. It's between the second and third. See how that makes a little gap there? And then knit 2 gets you right back up to where you just pulled a stitch from. Yes, this is creating extra stitches. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of it on the next round. I'm going to keep knitting all the way around to my marker, and I will meet you over there to discuss what happens next. Here I've come around to the end of the row. You should end with one of those. There should be only the second and third stitches on your needle. The second should be right before the marker. The third should be right after the marker. So you end right at the marker, pulling up a loop and knitting 2. If you don't, check back across your row to see what happened. If you had the correct stitch count before you started this section, which is 90 stitches, this should work out. And if it doesn't, it actually takes you up to 120 stitches when you finish this row. But if you don't end with one of these little guys, which depending on the thickness of your yarn can just look like a little cluster, but it's these 3 stitches, one stretched across the other 2. And then there should be one single stitch between each of your pulled stitches like that, pulled stitch bundles. So bundle of 3, 1, bundle of 3, 1. If you don't see that all the way back across your row, you missed like a knit 1 somewhere, that kind of thing. You need those for the next row, because the next row, round 3, is knit 2 together, knit 2. Now what you're doing on this row is these stitches want to twist or jam up on each other, but you're taking the pull-up stitch that you made and you're knitting it together with the single stitch that sits out in front, and then you're knitting the 2 underneath. So if you need to kind of get under that pull-up stitch, like when it's really jammed tight, I can see the underside of it And here is the overside. It's the stitch that comes across them all. This front part is what you want to be knitting together if you need to pull them apart. Sorry, my yarn is a little fuzzy here. You want to be knitting your straight knit stitch and the pulled stitch together. And then your knit two should be the two stitches that were under what that crossed. And then again, if you need to pull it out, I come from under to pull it out so it's out, so I can grab the front two strands there to knit two together and then knit two. You can use your fingers to get this too, but here's the one. The second one of what we're knitting together is that pulled stitch. Knit those together and knit two. Pull that stitch out so he's in the right place to knit two together and knit two. You can see that cements your pull-up stitch in place and puts you back down to the right stitch count again. Here's what it should roughly look like. That'll look a little different depending on the thickness of yarn you're using. I pull out that one so I can knit them together and knit two. I'll meet you on the other end of this round. Here's my last one. Kind of pull that so the loop and the single stitch get knit together. And knit two, and you should be back. If everything went well, you are back at the beginning of the round. I'm gonna again knit one more just to lock my stitch marker in. But then you can see my color changing yarn kind of almost makes these pop a little more. You can see the decorative stitch that is pulling across and maybe pulling a little bit of holes other places, but they're very, very subtle and small right now. These were rounds 2 and 3. The times that this combination happens, it happens again on round 6 and 7, but the number of stitches you go over to do your pull-up is different. Pay very close attention to that. But on round 7, again, the knit two together should be your single stitch and the loop that's next to it. To create this look, it'll just be a longer pullover. The other places this happens is much later in the yoke section. It will happen again at rounds 26 and 27. Pay attention there because it breaks from the pattern we've set up a little. There's still drawing up a loop with your right hand needle, but the pattern is different of how many stitches are between these loops. So just follow the directions as written. And then rounds 30 and 31, return back to what we just did. So this video will help with all of those rows. Thanks for joining us once again for one of our Ranunculus assistance videos. Here's what it looks like. Again, since we're knitting from the top down, that's what it's going to look like, the first decorative element on the yoke of my sweater. And that element happens 4 times with different stitch combinations. The next video, we'll go over how to do a regular right lifted increase. We already did a video about doing the right lifted increase on a purl stitch. Now we're in the section where it will follow her instructions better because they're on knit stitches. But I'm going to do a video for that too. We have the written instructions. Some people visually pick it up better. I have a right lifted increase video already. It is paired with a left lifted increase. We're going to do a really quick one, just this by itself on this sweater. And I'll try to make a video helping us with some of the open lace work leaf patterns or flower patterns when I have a chance. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to this channel that costs you nothing. Joining the Facebook knit along page, Sun Dragon knit along page over on Facebook also costs you nothing. If you'd like to support the work that we're doing at Sun Dragon with all of these videos and with Liz and I talking together, all that kind of stuff, you can go over to patreon.com/sundragon and sign up for a monthly subscription from small to large. I also have memberships on this channel from small to medium if you'd like to support, again, the work that we're doing here. We appreciate it very much. May your crafting be filled with joy and confidence. I'll see you in the next video.